Hello and welcome to Dateline London. The no-fly zone in Libya. Where does this leave Colonel Gaddafi? Plus Japan's nuclear crisis and the crisis of confidence in the safety of nuclear power. My guests today are Dr. Vincent Magombe of Africa Inform International, Nabila Ramdani, who's an Algerian journalist, Stryker Maguire of Newsweek, and Temko of The Observer. Well, the no-fly zone in Libya raises a whole series of questions. Will it work? Is the aim really regime change? But what would it take to get rid of Gaddafi? And why did it take so long to achieve? Perhaps because President Obama himself was very reluctant. Can we begin there, Stryker? I mean, he does not seem to have been the greatest enthusiast for this compared to, say, Sarkozy or Cameron.
Well, I mean, there's some very basic reasons for it. Iraq, George W. Bush, and a couple hundred years of American history. I think America was in a weird position here in particular. Anything it does now in that part of the world, in the greater Middle East, is going to be suspect. And there were some philosophical arguments about how this was really should be a European issue because it's on their doorstep, et cetera, et cetera. But he is also a very deliberate kind of individual. I mean, he
takes his time. He did over Afghanistan, for example.
He's frustratingly, purposeful and thoughtful. And so it took him a couple of weeks to get to the point that he finally got this week, which I think, in the end, will help him politically in terms of how we all judge it, because in the end it was not just a no-fly zone, but it was kind of a no-fly zone plus.
All necessary measures can be taken, so it's kind of expanded to...
Exactly.
And in a way, he in that same fashion, he got basically to a good place in Egypt, but not very elegantly.
Yeah.
In other words,
he got there. But does it suit everybody to pretend that this is the French and the British who are in the lead, where everybody knows that without the Americans nothing would happen?
Yeah, it does suit, absolutely. And it suits, as you point out, it suits Britain, because this is a maiden foreign policy victory of sorts for David Cameron. It suits Sarkozy, who prefers busying himself with Libya to just about any other political alternative now.
Well, especially since he desperately mishandled the situation in Tunisia and Egypt. Let's not remember that he completely misread the situation in Tunisia and Egypt. His foreign, now former minister had to resign because she made that appalling speech in Parliament supporting Ben Ali, very obviously offering military and financial support to both Tunisia and Egypt. And let's not forget also that over the Christmas holiday, almost every single of his cabinet ministers was spending some time with an autocrat in North Africa and in the Arab world. The former the Prime Minister, François Fillon, his wife and his 5 children were staying with the Mubaraks. Michel Alliot-Marie was staying with Ben Ali, and Sarkozy himself was staying with the King of Morocco.
Gathering intelligence, no doubt, as to what the mood in the Arab. There's a paradox here, isn't there? All across the Arab world, can't live with the Americans, can't live without them. I mean, that without the Americans behind this wouldn't be happening, and I take it you're in favour of the no-fly zone and whatever it means.
No, you're quite wrong to say that I'm in favour of the no-fly zone.
Right.
I actually think that there's a rather sinister double-speak in the UN resolution, because it claims to protect civilians, to end the violence, and yet it makes it abundantly clear that armed force is going to be used against the Libyans. There are very strong reasons to believe that we cannot trust the pilots to do specific, surgical bombing.
Precision, well, that doesn't exist.
That doesn't exist.
Any pilot would admit it, although the politicians
any
tend not
military
to.
strategist
But do you really think that it would be better to do nothing and just let this play out without any kind of military intervention at all?
I think we need to pause and reflect about what is actually going on in Libya that upsets so much the moral West and indeed the Arab League of autocrats who are now, looking at Libya as
doesn't upset them with Bahrain, perhaps? As,
not with Bahrain, not with Yemen, not with so many countries.
I'll come to visit in a moment, but so what's your answer to that question? What is it that upsets the West morally about Libya?
I think we need to look at the big picture in a more rational way. What's happening in Libya is certainly not what's happened in Tunisia and in Egypt, where we had full-scale revolutions, where the vast majority of people peacefully demonstrated against their regime and wanted their dictators to go. In Libya, we have what seems to be a minority of armed rebels who, for all legitimate reasons, are challenging a dictator with whom they're unhappy.
And there's a historical tribal difference between east and west of Libya.
And Tripolitana.
Yeah,
I think I would be the first one who wants Gaddafi to be really whipped. He's done horrible, nasty things, you know, the dictatorial things. So if he went, I would be sure that we would be looking at other dictators like my president in Uganda, everybody going,
well,
you know, one day.
Before we came on air, we should have an island where all the dictators
where
can
they
go
can go,
and
where they can go. And
stories.
if I was him really to save all this trouble, you know, we should wake up tomorrow, and him and his sons have decided, look, let's talk to the world now. We're ready to go.
But that's not going to happen, is it?
But Vincent, are you saying? Is there a but here? Are you saying but you're not in favor?
No, the but is the approach. You know, there are lots of questions, for example, in Africa or in the Arab Middle East and so on, about the approaches of Western governments, but also United Nations and so on. You know, are they going, for example, tomorrow? You know, we know that demonstrations are starting to happen in Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
If Saudi Arabia uses, and it is ready to use massive force against, are they going to bomb Saudi Arabia?
Well, your answer is no. Exactly. So
Bahrain next door, Yemen, and then Africa, where I come from. You know, we've had two demonstrations recently after the elections in Uganda against President Museveni. Hundreds of people have been arrested. They're being told they're rebels. Not a single word from anybody. Not a single concern.
Or what's going on in Ivory
Coast. So these double standards of Western operators.
But I think it's really. I think it's actually. I think Nabila is raising, and Vincent too, a very interesting point, and that is we have this. I think there's this tendency to see this as this organic thing that has happened in that part of the world. So you have Tunisia, check. Egypt, check. Oh, Libya, check. But it's so different.
Yes.
It's so. We don't know. I know very little about these so-called rebels.
That's an essential point here, because let's remember what Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was saying only a couple of days ago. She stated, "We are working extremely hard to try and find out who these rebels are. Who are we dealing with? Well, we don't know who these people are. They might turn out to be worse than Gaddafi."
Indeed they might. But I mean, the point raised by David Cameron yesterday was the reason we're doing things in one country and not in another is because we can. Yeah. Of course, that was also what was said in Iraq in 1990.
Although the one thing I'm fairly sure of is this is not going to be another Iraq for lots of reasons. One, it is not only explicitly said in this UN resolution, and I agree with Nabila. I mean, for me, the most interesting thing of the last 2 weeks is not the UN, it's the Arab League. It's that basically this historic talking shop where I remember vividly before Iraq War I, these guys saying, oh, hands off the, you know, this is a fraternal Arab solidarity move, everything will be sorted out. And then, you know, a state is invaded and it gets a little bit more messy. But the default position of the Arab League is not to say to the outside world, let's have a no-fly zone.